They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when the blood that saves your child comes from the man you humiliated hours before? Alexandra Pierce, CEO of Titan Tech, had everything: power, wealth, respect. But in one devastating moment, she learned that none of it mattered. The janitor she mocked in her lobby that morning was now the only person standing between her daughter and death. His blood, his choice, her shame. This is the story of how cruelty met grace in a hospital corridor, and how two broken families found redemption in the most unexpected place. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The first light of dawn hadn't yet broken through the glass towers of downtown when Daniel Cross pushed his cleaning cart through the revolving doors of Titan Tech Industries. The marble lobby stretched before him like a cathedral of commerce, all polished stone and chrome, designed to intimidate anyone who didn't belong. And Daniel knew, with the quiet certainty of a man who'd learned his place, that he didn't belong. Not anymore. He'd been an engineer once, a good one. The kind of man who solved problems that kept other engineers awake at night. But that was before Sarah died, before the medical bills became a mountain that buried everything he'd built, before choosing between my career and my daughter stopped being a hypothetical question and became Tuesday morning. Now he was a janitor, and he was grateful for it. "Daddy, don't forget my lunch," 7-year-old Mia had reminded him that morning, her small hands carefully packing her sandwich while Daniel tied his work boots. She had Sarah's eyes, dark and deep, full of an old soul's understanding of things no child should have to understand. "I've got it right here, sweetheart." He'd held up her frozen lunchbox, the one with Elsa's face half scraped off from 3 years of use. They couldn't afford a new one. They could barely afford the old one. "And Daddy?" Mia had looked up at him with that expression that still broke his heart every single time. The one that said she knew they were struggling, that she knew he was tired, that she knew and was trying so hard not to be a burden. "You're the best daddy in the whole world." He'd kissed her forehead, swallowing the lump in his throat. "And you're the best daughter. Now go brush your teeth. Mrs. Chen will be here any minute." Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, watched Mia before school for $20 a week and whatever leftover groceries Daniel could spare. It wasn't much, but it was what kept his daughter safe while he scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans in buildings where men wore suits that cost more than his monthly rent. The Titan Tech lobby was Daniel's first stop every morning. He started at 5 a.m., 2 hours before the first executives arrived, finishing just as the building came to life. Usually, he was invisible, a ghost in a gray uniform pushing a cart, erasing the evidence of yesterday so tomorrow could pretend to be clean. But this morning, something was different. Daniel's cart had gotten stuck. One of the wheels had caught on a seam in the marble floor right in front of the executive elevator. He was on his knees trying to work it free, his cleaning supplies scattered around him when he heard the sharp click of heels. "What is this?" The voice was cold, precise, the kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. Daniel looked up and immediately recognized her. Alexandra Pierce, CEO. Her face was on the wall in the main conference room, part of the leadership display that Daniel dusted every Thursday. In the portrait, she looked powerful but approachable. In person, at 6:15 in the morning, she looked like winter given human form. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The wheel caught. I'll have it moved in just... Do you have any idea what time it is?" Alexandra's eyes were ice blue, her dark hair pulled back in a style that probably had a fancy name Daniel didn't know. She wore a gray suit that looked like it cost more than his car. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. I need that elevator." "Yes, ma'am, I understand. If you could just give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds that I don't have." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "What's your name?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "Daniel Cross, ma'am." "Well, Daniel Cross, do you understand the concept of timing, of awareness, of not blocking critical infrastructure during peak hours?" He wanted to point out that it wasn't peak hours, that he was there specifically because it wasn't peak hours, that the wheel had caught on a flaw in her expensive marble floor, that he'd been trying to fix it before anyone even noticed. But he'd learned over the past 3 years of janitorial work that explanations were just excuses in a different tone. "I apologize, ma'am. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." Alexandra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something flickered across her face, something that looked almost like fear. But it was gone before Daniel could be sure. And for God's sake, learn to anticipate. That's what separates professionals from... She gestured vaguely at his cart, his uniform, his entire existence. This. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked to the main elevator instead, leaving Daniel on his knees in front of a cart he'd been trying to move for her benefit, surrounded by the scattered tools of his trade. The security guard, Marcus, appeared at Daniel's elbow a moment later. He was a good man, Marcus, one of the few in the building who treated Daniel like a human being instead of furniture. "You okay, Danny?" Daniel nodded, finally working the wheel free. "I'm fine." "She's been on edge lately." Marcus lowered his voice. "Word is her daughter's sick, been in and out of the hospital for months." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He knew about sick daughters. He knew about hospitals and fear and the way the world narrowed down to please God. Just let her be okay. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Not many people do. She keeps it private. But that doesn't excuse Marcus shook his head. "You're a good guy, Danny. Don't let her make you feel small." But as Daniel pushed his cart toward the maintenance closet, he did feel small, because that was the thing about people like Alexandra Pierce. They didn't have to try to make you feel small. The distance between her world and his was so vast that standing in her presence was enough to remind him of everything he'd lost. The morning continued. Daniel cleaned 3 more floors, serviced 2 conference rooms, and restocked all the break room supplies. At 11:30, he clocked out and caught the bus to St. Vincent's Hospital across town. Mia had a checkup today. Nothing serious, just a routine follow-up for the heart murmur they'd discovered 6 months ago. The doctor said it was minor, probably nothing, but they wanted to monitor it. And because Daniel's insurance was the kind of catastrophe plan that covered almost nothing, every checkup meant another bill he'd have to negotiate. But he'd make it work. He always made it work. The pediatric cardiology unit at St. Vincent's was on the 4th floor, decorated with murals of underwater scenes and cartoon fish. Mia loved those fish. She'd named them all during previous visits, giving them elaborate backstories and family relationships that she narrated while they waited. "Daddy, look! It's Gerald!" She pointed at a painted seahorse as they walked toward the check-in desk. "He's the one who's secretly a spy, remember?" "How could I forget?" Daniel smiled, his earlier humiliation fading in the warmth of his daughter's enthusiasm. This was what mattered. Not Alexandra Pierce, not Titan Tech, not the gap between who he used to be and who he was now. Just Mia, healthy and happy, and pointing at cartoon fish. The nurse at the desk looked up with a smile. "Daniel Cross? Mia Cross? That's us. Dr. Patel is running about 15 minutes behind, but you can wait in room 4B. We'll call you as soon as she's ready." Room 4B was familiar territory, the same examination room they'd been in for the last 3 visits. Mia climbed onto the table and immediately began telling Daniel about a story she was writing at school, something involving a princess and a dragon who were actually best friends, but everyone thought they were enemies. And then the princess teaches the dragon how to bake cookies, and they open a bakery together. And all the kingdom comes, and... The overhead speaker crackled to life. "Code red, 4th floor, code red. All available personnel to 4th floor, pediatric wing, stat, code red." Daniel's blood went cold. Code red meant emergency. Code red meant someone was dying. Mia's eyes went wide. "Daddy, what's..." "It's okay, sweetheart. Stay here. Don't move." He opened the door just as nurses and doctors began running past, their faces grim. Daniel's instinct was to stay with Mia, to keep her safe and separate from whatever crisis was unfolding. But then he heard it. Screaming, a woman's voice raw with terror coming from somewhere down the hall. "Help! Somebody help her! She's not breathing! Please!" Daniel's feet moved before his brain caught up. He ran toward the sound, his heart hammering. He could hear Mia calling after him, but he couldn't stop. That voice, that particular frequency of fear, it bypassed every rational thought and plugged straight into the primal part of his brain that said someone's child is dying. The scene was chaos. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, lay convulsing on the floor outside one of the examination rooms. Blonde hair, pink dress. Her lips were turning blue. A woman knelt beside her, expensive clothes now crumpled and stained, hands shaking, completely frozen in panic. And Daniel recognized her immediately. Alexandra Pierce, CEO of Titan Tech, the woman who'd humiliated him 6 hours ago. But that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the child who was dying on the floor. Daniel dropped to his knees beside the girl. His engineering mind, dormant for so long, suddenly roared to life, calculating, analyzing, solving the problem in front of him. She's seizing. When did it start? Alexandra stared at him, her face blank with shock. She didn't recognize him. Why would she? He was just a janitor, just a nobody. I don't know. Maybe 30 seconds? A minute? Has this happened before? Yes, but not like this. Not this bad. The doctors are coming, but she's not. I need you to stay calm. Daniel's voice was steady, the same voice he'd used 3 years ago when explaining complex systems to nervous clients. I'm going to help her, but I need you to breathe. He turned the girl on her side, recovery position, protecting her airway. He could see now that she had a medical bracelet on her wrist. He grabbed it, reading quickly. Ellie Pierce, O negative, severe anemia, immune deficiency, emergency contact. A doctor burst through the nearby door, followed by 2 nurses with a crash cart. Move aside, everyone move! Daniel backed away, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The medical team swarmed over Ellie, their movements precise and practiced. One of the nurses was calling out vitals. The doctor was administering something through an IV port Daniel hadn't noticed. Alexandra stood frozen, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked nothing like the woman who'd dressed him down in the Titan Tech lobby. She looked like what she was, a terrified mother watching her child fight for life. Daddy, Daniel turned. Mia stood in the hallway, her eyes huge with fear. Daddy, is that girl okay? He scooped his daughter up, holding her tight. The doctors are helping her, sweetheart. She's going to be okay. Please let her be okay. The seizure was stopping. Ellie's body went still, her breathing ragged but present. The doctor was speaking in low, urgent tones to Alexandra, who nodded mechanically, not really hearing. Mrs. Pierce, we need to get her to the ICU immediately. Her hemoglobin is critically low. We're going to need to do an emergency transfusion, and whatever she needs, just save her. They transferred Ellie to a gurney, moving with controlled urgency toward the elevators. Alexandra started to follow, then paused. She turned back to Daniel, her face a mask of confusion and desperate gratitude. You helped her. Thank you. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Then she was gone, running after the gurney, leaving Daniel standing in the hallway with Mia in his arms and the smell of fear still hanging in the air. Daddy, you were really brave. Daniel kissed the top of Mia's head. I just did what anyone would do, sweetheart. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Most people would have called for help and stood back. But Daniel couldn't, because he knew, with the certainty of lived experience, that every second mattered when a child was dying. He'd learned that 3 years ago, holding Sarah's hand as she slipped away, as the machines beeped and the doctors did everything they could, and it still wasn't enough. A nurse approached them, her face kind but tired. Mr. Cross? I'm so sorry about the delay. If you and Mia want to come with me, Dr. Patel can see you now. Actually, Daniel said slowly, could you tell me something? That girl, Ellie Pierce, they said she needs a transfusion? I really can't discuss other patients. I understand, but if they need blood and if I happen to be a match, how would I go about donating? The nurse studied him for a long moment. You're O negative? I am. Something shifted in her expression. Come with me. She led them not to Dr. Patel's office, but to a small consultation room. A moment later, a man in a white coat entered, older, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Cross, I'm Dr. Raymond Chen, head of pediatric hematology. I understand you witnessed the emergency with Ellie Pierce? Yes, and I heard she needs blood. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Ellie has severe aplastic anemia. Her bone marrow isn't producing enough blood cells. We've been managing it with transfusions and medications, but she's taken a turn for the worse. She needs O-negative blood, and our local supply is—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Limited. I'm O-negative. I know. I pulled your file." Dr. Chen sat down, his expression grave. "Mr. Cross, I need to be straight with you. What I'm about to ask is not standard procedure. If we had other options, I wouldn't be asking. But Ellie's situation is critical, and you're one of only 3 O-negative patients currently in the building." Daniel felt Mia's hand tighten on his. "What do you need?" "A directed donation. Typically, we'd wait for the blood bank, but given the shortage and the urgency. If you're willing, we could take you to the donation center right now." "Do it." "Daddy?" Mia's voice was small. "Will it hurt?" Daniel knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. "Remember when you skinned your knee last week and you were so brave? It'll be like that. A little pinch, and then I'll be helping that little girl get better. Like a superhero?" "Exactly like a superhero." Dr. Chen's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went pale. "We need to move. Now." The donation center was 2 floors down, a quiet room with reclining chairs and the antiseptic smell that Daniel had come to associate with helplessness. But not today. Today, for the first time in 3 years, he had something to offer that actually mattered. A phlebotomist, young with kind eyes and steady hands, got him set up in one of the chairs. Mia sat beside him, holding his free hand. "You're very brave, Mr. Cross," the phlebotomist said as she prepped his arm. "This is a wonderful thing you're doing." Daniel didn't feel brave. He felt like a man who'd been given an unexpected chance at redemption for sins he couldn't name. The needle went in. Dark red blood began flowing through the tube into the collection bag. Daniel watched it, mesmerized. This, his blood, the only thing he had that was worth something, was going to save a child's life. Sarah would have been proud. "Mr. Cross?" He looked up. Alexandra Pierce stood in the doorway of the donation center, and this time there was recognition in her eyes. Oh God, she knew. She knew he was the janitor, the man she'd humiliated, the man she'd dismissed as less than human, and now that same man was lying in a chair, giving his blood to save her daughter. The color drained from Alexandra's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "Doctor." Chen appeared behind her. "Mrs. Pierce, I told you to wait in—" "It's him." Her voice was barely a whisper. "From this morning. From Titan Tech. He's the only donor we have available," Dr. Chen finished firmly, "and I suggest you let him donate in peace." But Alexandra couldn't move. She stood there, frozen, as 3 years of corporate arrogance collapsed into this single moment of terrible clarity. Daniel met her eyes. He could have said so many things. He could have thrown her cruelty back in her face. He could have demanded an apology, made her beg, leveraged this moment into something that benefited him. Instead, he said quietly, "How is Ellie?" Alexandra's face crumpled. "I don't know. They won't tell me anything except that she needs blood immediately. They said—" Her voice broke. "They said if they don't get her stabilized in the next 30 minutes, she might not—" She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Then let's help her," Daniel said simply. Mia, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. "Is Ellie your daughter?" Alexandra looked at the small girl, then nodded, tears streaming down her face. "My daddy's the best," Mia said with absolute conviction. "His blood is going to make her all better. You don't have to be scared anymore." And Alexandra Pierce, CEO, powerhouse, woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires, collapsed into a chair and sobbed. Dr. Chen gestured to the phlebotomist. "How much do we have?" "We're at 350 milliliters. Standard donation is 450. "I need you to take more," Daniel said. "Mr. Cross, we can't—" "How much does she need?" Dr. Chen and the phlebotomist exchanged glances. "Mr. Cross, taking more than a standard unit can be dangerous for the donor. You could experience severe dizziness, fatigue, even—" "How much?" Does she need? A long pause. Then, we'd prefer 2 units, 900 milliliters. Then take 2 units. Daddy, no. Mia's hand tightened on his. That's too much. Daniel squeezed back. Sweetheart, remember what Mommy used to say about how we're all connected? About how helping someone else is the same as helping ourselves? Mia's eyes filled with tears. But Mommy's gone. I don't want you to go too. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. I'm just going to be a little tired afterward, and you're going to help take care of me, right? Mia nodded, wiping her eyes with her free hand. The phlebotomist looked at Dr. Chen, who hesitated, then nodded. Do it, but monitor him closely. The blood continued to flow. Daniel could feel the change in his body, the lightness, the slight chill creeping into his extremities. He donated blood before, but never this much. Never under these circumstances. Alexandra had stopped crying. She sat rigid in her chair, staring at Daniel as if trying to solve an impossible equation. Finally, she spoke, her voice raw. Why are you doing this? After how I treated you this morning. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, watching his blood fill the second bag. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Because 3 years ago, my wife died of complications from pneumonia, and I know what it's like to sit in a hospital and feel completely powerless. And if there's even a chance that I can spare you that feeling, that I can give Ellie one more day, one more chance, then the question isn't why would I do this? He looked directly at her. The question is, how could I not? The second bag was nearly full. Daniel's vision was starting to blur slightly at the edges, his skin pale. Mia was crying openly now, holding his hand like a lifeline. That's enough, the phlebotomist said, removing the needle with practiced efficiency. Mr. Cross, I need you to stay seated for at least 15 minutes. Here's some juice and crackers. You need to eat something immediately, Doctor. Chen took the blood bags with an expression of profound relief. I'll get these to the lab for immediate cross-match and then straight to Ellie. Mrs. Pierce, you should come with me. But Alexandra didn't move. She stood and walked slowly to Daniel's chair, her eyes red, her perfect composure completely shattered. I don't know how to... She stopped, started again. There aren't words for what you've just done. For the kind of person who would... Her voice broke again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for this morning, for how I spoke to you, for how I... Save it for when Ellie wakes up, Daniel interrupted gently. Right now, you should be with your daughter. Dr. Chen put a hand on Alexandra's shoulder. He's right. Come on. As they left, Alexandra looked back one last time. Daniel met her gaze and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an understanding that the ground had fundamentally shifted beneath both their feet. The phlebotomist brought Daniel a blanket and a small cup of orange juice. Mia climbed carefully into the chair beside him, curling against his side. You're really pale, Daddy. I know, sweetheart, but I'll be okay. The juice will help. Will that girl be okay too? I hope so. I really hope so. They sat in silence for several minutes, Daniel sipping his juice, Mia pressed against his side, both of them processing what had just happened. Finally, Mia spoke again. Daddy? That lady, the one who was crying? She was mean to you this morning, wasn't she? Daniel hesitated. How did you know? I could tell, from the way you looked at her, from the way she looked at you. Mia looked up at him with Sarah's eyes. But you helped her anyway, even though she was mean. Yes. Why? It was the same question Alexandra had asked. But coming from his daughter, it carried different weight. Because, sweetheart, sometimes people are mean because they're scared, or tired, or carrying something heavy that we can't see. And if we're mean back to them, then all we've done is add more meanness to the world. He kissed the top of her head. Your mom taught me that. She said that kindness doesn't mean letting people hurt you, but it does mean not letting their hurt turn you into someone you're not. I miss Mommy. Me too, baby. Me too. 20 minutes later, Dr. Patel finally arrived to examine Mia. Her checkup went quickly. The heart murmur was stable, no changes, continue monitoring, come back in 3 months. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half wondering what was happening 2 floors up, whether his blood had been enough, whether a little girl he'd never met would live to see tomorrow. As they were leaving, Dr. Chen found them in the hallway. Mr. Cross, the transfusion was successful, Ellie's stabilizing. The relief was so intense, Daniel had to lean against the wall. Thank God. She's not out of the woods yet. The next 72 hours are critical, but thanks to you, she has a chance. Dr. Chen extended his hand. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've met a lot of brave people. But what you did today, that was extraordinary. Daniel shook his hand, still feeling slightly dizzy. I just did what anyone... No. Dr. Chen's voice was firm. Not anyone. Most people would have helped if it was convenient, if it didn't cost them anything. You gave blood until you nearly passed out for a child whose mother humiliated you. That's not anyone. That's you. As they rode the bus home, Mia fell asleep against Daniel's shoulder, exhausted by the day's drama. Daniel stared out the window at the passing city, his mind churning. He kept replaying the moment when Alexandra had recognized him, the horror in her eyes, the weight of her sudden understanding that the man she'd dismissed as beneath her notice was the only thing standing between her daughter and death. Part of him, a small petty part he wasn't proud of, felt vindicated, felt like maybe, for once, the universe had delivered some justice. But mostly, he just felt tired. When they got home, Daniel made Mia's favorite dinner, mac and cheese from a box with hot dogs cut into little pieces. She ate quietly, still processing. Daddy, do you think Ellie likes Frozen? I don't know, sweetheart. Why? Because if she does, maybe when she's better, she could come over and we could watch it together. She probably needs a friend. Being sick is scary. Daniel felt his throat tighten. That's a really kind thought, Mia. Will we see her again? I don't know. Maybe. But even as he said it, Daniel knew the truth. People like Alexandra Pierce didn't stay in the orbits of people like him. After today, after the crisis passed, she would go back to her world of boardrooms and executive decisions. He would go back to his world of cleaning carts and bus schedules. The ground would stop shaking, and the distance between them would reassert itself. That was just how the world worked. After Mia was in bed, Daniel sat at their small kitchen table with a mug of tea, staring at the bills piled in the center. The hospital would send him a bill for today's visit. The donated blood was free, but Mia's checkup wouldn't be. He did the math in his head, juggling which bills he could pay, which he could delay, which he could negotiate. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Dr. Chen. I hope it's okay that I'm contacting you. I wanted you to know that Ellie is holding steady. Her mother wanted me to tell you thank you. She's asked if she can contact you directly. If you're comfortable with that, please let me know. Daniel stared at the message for a long time. He thought about saying no, about maintaining that distance, about protecting himself from whatever complicated gratitude Alexandra Pierce might feel obligated to express. But then he thought about Mia's question. Do you think Ellie likes Frozen? And he thought about how 7-year-olds didn't understand the boundaries that adults drew between worlds. He typed back, tell her I'm glad Ellie is okay. She can contact me if she wants, but she doesn't owe me anything. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then turned off his phone and went to bed. Tomorrow he'd be back at Titan Tech, pushing his cleaning cart through lobbies that weren't built for people like him. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Cross fell asleep thinking that maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that mattered, something that Sarah would have been proud of, something that made the distance between who he used to be and who he'd become feel just a little bit smaller. In the ICU at St. Vincent's Hospital, Alexandra Pierce sat beside her daughter's bed, holding Ellie's small hand, watching the monitors that tracked every heartbeat. The blood flowing through Ellie's veins, the blood that was bringing color back to her face, strength back to her body, had come from the man Alexandra had dismissed that morning as less than human. She kept seeing his face, the way he'd knelt beside Ellie without hesitation, the way he'd offered his blood without asking for anything in return, the way he'd looked at her, not with anger or resentment, but with simple human decency. I don't deserve this, she whispered to the sleeping child. I don't deserve his kindness. But Ellie did, and that was what mattered. Alexandra pulled out her phone and opened the message Dr. Chen had sent her, the one with Daniel Cross's response. Tell her I'm glad Ellie is okay. She can contact me if she wants, but she doesn't owe me anything. She read it 3 times, trying to understand the kind of person who would write those words. Then she began to type. Outside, the city continued its relentless turning, indifferent to crisis, immune to grace, blind to the small moments when the distance between worlds momentarily collapsed and two human beings glimpsed each other across the divide. But in a hospital room in a small apartment across town, something had shifted. Something that couldn't be unshifted. And tomorrow, when the sun rose on Titan Tech's marble lobby and Daniel Cross returned with his cleaning cart, the world would look exactly the same. But it wouldn't be. Not anymore. The message Alexandra typed and deleted 4 times before finally sending read simply, "Mr. Cross, this is Alexandra Pierce. I know words are inadequate, but I need to try. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow? I'd like to speak with you properly." She hit send at 11:40 p.m., not expecting a response until morning. But her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "I work until noon. After that, I can meet you at the hospital if that's easier for you." Alexandra stared at the message, something twisting in her chest. Even now, even after everything, his first thought was about making things easier for her. The man had given nearly 2 pints of blood, and he was worried about her convenience. She typed back, "The hospital cafeteria at 12:30? And Mr. Cross, please let me buy you lunch. It's the absolute least I can do." This time, the response took longer. She imagined him sitting in whatever small apartment he lived in, weighing whether to accept even this tiny gesture. Finally, "Okay." Alexandra set down her phone and looked at her daughter. Ellie was sleeping peacefully now, her breathing steady, color returning to her cheeks. The monitors showed strong vital signs. The crisis had passed, at least for tonight, but Alexandra couldn't shake the feeling that a different kind of crisis was just beginning, one that had nothing to do with blood counts and everything to do with the person she'd become. The morning came too quickly. Alexandra had dozed in the chair beside Ellie's bed, jerking awake every time a monitor beeped or a nurse entered. At 6 a.m., Dr. Chen came by on his rounds. "She's doing remarkably well," he said, checking Ellie's chart. "The transfusion worked exactly as we hoped. Her hemoglobin is up to 8.2. Still low, but much better than the critical levels we saw yesterday." "When can she go home?" "Let's give it another 48 hours of observation. If she continues improving, we'll discuss discharge." Doctor. Chen looked at Alexandra with an expression that was both kind and assessing. "Mrs. Pierce, you should go home. Get some real sleep. Eat something. Ellie needs you strong." "I can't leave her." "You're not leaving her. You're taking care of yourself so you can take care of her." He paused. "And I believe you have an appointment at 12:30 that you shouldn't miss." Alexandra's head snapped up. "How did you—" "I'm the one who gave Mr. Cross your contact information, remember?" Dr. Chen's expression softened. "That man gave blood until he was white as a sheet for a child he'd never met. The least you can do is show up." He was right. Of course he was right. Alexandra kissed Ellie's forehead, still warm, still alive, still here, and forced herself to leave the ICU. Her driver, Thomas, was waiting in the parking garage where she'd abandoned her car the day before. He stood as she approached, his face carefully neutral. "Mrs. Pierce, I'm glad to hear Miss Ellie is improving." "Thank you, Thomas." Alexandra slid into the back seat, suddenly aware of how she must look. Yesterday's clothes rumpled, no makeup, hair falling out of its neat arrangement. She probably looked more human than she had in years. "Take me home, please. I need to change before—" She stopped, realizing she didn't know how to finish that sentence. "Before I meet with the janitor whose life I tried to make small yesterday, who then saved my daughter's life." Thomas, who'd worked for her for 7 years and had learned to read her silences, simply nodded and pulled out of the parking garage. The Pierce home was a modern architectural statement in the hills overlooking the city, all glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. Alexandra had bought it 2 years ago, after the divorce from Ellie's father, wanting something that was entirely hers. Now, walking through the front door into the soaring foyer, she felt nothing but the echo of her own footsteps. She showered quickly, washing away the hospital smell, then stood in her closet trying to decide what one wore to apologize to someone whose humanity you'd dismissed. Everything looked too corporate, too aggressive, too much like armor. Finally, she chose simple black pants and a cream sweater. Still expensive, because everything she owned was expensive, but at least not a power suit. Her phone rang as she was applying minimal makeup. Her assistant, Jennifer. Alexandra, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday afternoon. The board meeting. I know, I left. You left? Jennifer's voice rose in pitch. You left in the middle of presenting the Q4 projections? Alexandra, Marcus Holloway is furious. He's calling for an emergency session to discuss your fitness for leadership. Those are his exact words. Alexandra closed her eyes. Marcus Holloway, the board member who'd been trying to push her out since she took over as CEO 3 years ago. Of course he'd use this against her. Schedule the emergency session for Monday morning. I'll address it then. Alexandra, you need to do damage control now. Let me draft a statement about a family emergency. No. Alexandra's voice was firm. No statements, no spin. I'll handle this on Monday. But, Jennifer, my daughter almost died yesterday, and right now I have something more important than Marcus Holloway's ego to deal with. She paused, then added more gently, I know this is hard for you too. You're trying to protect me, but some things are more important than protecting my position at Titan Tech. There was a long silence. Then Jennifer said quietly, How is Ellie? Better. Stable. I'm glad. And Alexandra, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Holloway can wait. After hanging up, Alexandra sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized, stripped of the corporate veneer, forced to confront the ugliness underneath. She thought about what Daniel Cross must see when he looked at her. Not the CEO, not the leader of a Fortune 500 company, just a woman who'd been cruel for no reason other than that she could be. At 11:30, Thomas drove her back to St. Vincent's. She stopped by the ICU first, where Ellie was awake and eating Jell-O with the focused intensity of a child who'd spent too many days unable to keep food down. Mommy, Ellie's face lit up. Look, it's red Jell-O. That's the best kind. Alexandra kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the scent of her, antiseptic and illness, but alive, so blessedly alive. It definitely is, baby. Dr. Chen said I'm doing really good. He said someone gave me blood and it made me all better. Ellie looked up at her with curious eyes. Who was it? Alexandra hesitated. A very kind man named Daniel. Can I meet him? I want to say thank you. Maybe. We'll see how you're feeling. I'm feeling lots better, see? Ellie lifted her arm where the IV was still taped. This doesn't even hurt anymore. A nurse came in to check vitals, giving Alexandra a convenient excuse to slip away. As she rode the elevator down to the cafeteria, her heart was hammering. She felt more nervous about this lunch than she had about any board presentation, any investor meeting, any hostile negotiation. The hospital cafeteria was a study in institutional beige, fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs, the smell of industrial food trying its best. Alexandra arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a table in the corner, away from the main flow of doctors and visitors. At exactly 12:30, Daniel Cross walked through the cafeteria entrance. He was wearing the same gray janitor's uniform from Titan Tech, his name badge still pinned to his chest. He'd clearly come straight from work. His face was still pale from yesterday's blood donation, but his posture was straight, his expression calm. Alexandra stood, her hand suddenly not knowing what to do. Mr. Cross, thank you for coming. Daniel, he said quietly. Please call me Daniel. Daniel, She gestured at the food line. Can I get you something? Anything you want. He glanced at the offerings. Pizza, sandwiches, salads that had seen better days. Coffee would be good. And maybe a sandwich. Of course. Please, sit. I'll get it. She could feel his surprise as she walked to the food line. Alexandra Pierce, CEO of Titan Tech, serving a janitor lunch in a hospital cafeteria. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. She returned with 2 coffees, a sandwich for him, a salad she had no intention of eating for herself. Daniel took the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the cup as if drawing warmth from it. How are you feeling? Alexandra asked. After yesterday, I mean. Tired, a little dizzy, but okay. You gave too much blood. I gave what was needed. He met her eyes directly. How's Ellie? Stable, improving, The doctors say if she continues like this, she can go home in a couple of days. Alexandra's voice caught. Because of you. Daniel was quiet for a moment, taking a sip of coffee. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Pierce. Alexandra, please. Alexandra, you didn't ask me here for medical updates. What do you really want to talk about? The directness caught her off guard. She'd expected him to be deferential, careful. Instead, he was looking at her with something that was neither anger nor forgiveness, just clarity. I want to apologize, she said, for yesterday morning, for the way I spoke to you, for the things The words caught in her throat. I treated you as if you were nothing, as if you were less than human. And I'm sorry. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? His voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath. Do you want me to tell you that it didn't hurt? It did. Do you want me to say I understand why you did it? I don't. Do you want absolution? He paused. I'm not a priest, Alexandra. I'm just a janitor who happened to have the right blood type at the right time. You're not just a janitor. To you, yesterday morning, I was. He wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. And that's the thing you actually need to apologize for. Not the specific words you said, but the fact that you looked at another human being and decided they were beneath your notice. Alexandra felt tears threatening. She'd cried more in the last 24 hours than in the previous 3 years combined. You're right, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to become someone who doesn't do that. Do you want to be? What? Do you want to become that person? Or do you just want to feel better about yourself? Daniel leaned forward slightly. Because if it's the second thing, I can give you what you need. I can tell you that you're forgiven, that yesterday morning doesn't matter, that saving Ellie balances all scales. We can finish this coffee, shake hands, and go back to our separate worlds. Is that what you want? Alexandra stared at him, feeling something crack open inside her chest. No. Then what do you want? I want to understand, she said, the words tumbling out. I want to understand how I became someone who could be that cruel. I want to understand how you could save my daughter after I treated you that way. I want to understand. She stopped, her voice breaking. I want to understand what happened to me. Daniel was quiet, studying her face. Finally, he said, Tell me about Ellie. The question caught her completely off guard. What? Tell me about your daughter. When did she get sick? Alexandra didn't know why he was asking, but something in his voice made her answer. 8 months ago. She started getting tired easily, bruising from the smallest bumps. We thought it was just kids get sick, you know? But then her pediatrician did blood work and everything was wrong. Her counts were all wrong. The memories came flooding back. They diagnosed her with severe aplastic anemia. Her bone marrow just stopped making enough blood cells. What's the treatment? Transfusions, medications. We're on a waiting list for a bone marrow transplant. But finding a match is... Alexandra's hands were shaking. She set down her coffee cup before she spilled it. It's been 8 months of hospitals and fear, of watching my daughter get weaker, of not being able to fix it. And the morning you yelled at me in the lobby? Alexandra closed her eyes. I'd been at the hospital all night. Ellie had spiked a fever. They thought she might have an infection, which could be catastrophic with her immune system. I was supposed to be at that board meeting to present projections that would determine whether we kept 300 jobs or cut them. I was running on 2 hours of sleep. I was terrified, and I was trying to hold everything together. She opened her eyes. And then I saw your cart blocking my elevator, and I just broke. You broke on me. Yes, and I'm sorry. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand that. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. But Alexandra, here's what you need to hear. Your fear doesn't excuse your cruelty. It explains it, but it doesn't excuse it. I know. Do you? He wasn't being cruel, just honest. Because I've worked as a janitor for 3 years. And you're not the first executive who's treated me like I'm invisible. You're not the first person who's decided that because I push a mop, I don't matter. You're just the first one who got confronted with the consequence. Alexandra felt like she'd been slapped. You're right. I usually am. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. But here's the thing. You asked me what I want from this conversation, and the truth is, I don't want anything from you. I didn't save Ellie to make you feel guilty. I saved her because that's what you do when a child is dying and you can help. But let me finish. His voice was still gentle. But if you're serious about changing, about understanding what happened to you, then you need to understand this. You didn't become cruel overnight. You built a system that allowed you to be cruel. You surrounded yourself with people who wouldn't challenge you. You created a hierarchy where some people mattered more than others. And then you were surprised when you started acting according to that hierarchy. Alexandra felt exposed, seen in a way she hadn't been in years. What should I do? I can't tell you that. I'm not a therapist or a life coach or whatever it is rich people hire to fix their problems. Daniel smiled slightly, taking the edge off the words. But I can tell you what I learned when my wife died. What's that? That being broken doesn't make you special. Everyone's broken. The only thing that matters is what you build with the pieces. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the cafeteria continued its mundane rhythm. Doctors grabbing quick lunches, visitors nursing coffees, the ambient noise of a hospital functioning. Finally, Alexandra said, Your wife, how did she... Pneumonia. She was 32, healthy, strong, never sick. And then one day she had a cough. A week later, she was gone. Daniel's voice was matter of fact, but Alexandra could hear the weight underneath. The medical bills bankrupted us. I was an engineer, a good one, but I couldn't work and take care of Mia and deal with everything, so I quit, or got fired, depending on how you look at it. By the time the dust settled, I'd lost my career, my savings, my house. The only thing I had left was my daughter. That's why you're a janitor. That's why I'm a janitor. He looked at her directly. And I'm not ashamed of it. It's honest work. It pays enough to keep a roof over Mia's head and food on the table. But people like you, he paused, people like you look at me and see failure. You see someone who couldn't hack it. You don't see a father who chose his daughter over his career. I'm sorry. I know you are. Now. Daniel finished his sandwich, drained his coffee. But here's my question. What are you going to do with that sorry? I don't understand. Apologizing to me is easy. I'm one person. But Alexandra, I'm not the only janitor at Titan Tech. I'm not the only person you've probably dismissed without thinking. So what are you going to do about that? The question hung in the air between them. Before Alexandra could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from the ICU. Ellie's asking for you. Everything's fine. She just wants her mom. I have to go, Alexandra said, standing. Of course. Daniel stood as well. They faced each other across the cafeteria table. Two people from different worlds, connected by blood and crisis and the strange alchemy of circumstance. Daniel, Alexandra said quietly. Thank you. Not just for the blood, for this, for being honest. You're welcome. And Alexandra? He waited until she met his eyes. Ellie is lucky to have you. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. You're a good mother who had a bad morning. That doesn't erase one or excuse the other, but it's important to remember both. Alexandra felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. How are you so... She couldn't finish. Broken, Daniel supplied. I'm broken, same as you. I just had 3 years to get used to it. They parted ways in the cafeteria, Alexandra heading to the elevators, Daniel heading back to Titan Tech to finish his shift. But as Alexandra rode up to the ICU, she couldn't stop thinking about his question. What are you going to do with that sorry? Ellie was sitting up in bed, drawing on a notepad a nurse had given her. She looked up as Alexandra entered, her face lighting up. Mommy, look, I drew the fish from the hallway. This one's Gerald. He's a spy, remember? Alexandra sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her daughter close. I remember, baby. Mommy, why are you crying? Because I'm happy you're okay, and because I learned something important today. What? Alexandra thought about Daniel's words, about systems and hierarchies, about what you build with broken pieces. That being kind is more important than being powerful, she said quietly. Ellie considered this with the seriousness of a 9-year-old. Is that why Daniel gave me his blood? Because he's kind? Yes, baby, that's exactly why. I really want to meet him. Can I? Alexandra looked at her daughter, weak but recovering, alive because a man she'd dismissed as nothing had given nearly 2 pints of blood without asking for anything in return. I'll ask him, she promised. That evening, after Ellie had fallen asleep and Alexandra was back in the uncomfortable ICU chair that was becoming too familiar, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Daniel. Ellie wants to meet you. She wants to say thank you. Would you be willing? I know I'm asking for more when you've already given so much, but she deleted the last part, rewrote it. No pressure. But if you're open to it, she'd love to meet the person who saved her life. Maybe you could bring Mia? Ellie mentioned she likes Frozen, and apparently Mia does too. She hit send before she could overthink it. The response came 20 minutes later. Mia would love that. We can come by tomorrow after I get off work, around 1. Fair warning. Mia has about 6,000 questions prepared and will probably try to organize a full Frozen viewing party in the ICU. Alexandra laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in days. Ellie has 7,000 questions, so they should get along great. See you tomorrow at 1. She set down her phone and looked at her sleeping daughter. Tomorrow, she'd have to deal with Marcus Holloway and the board. Tomorrow, she'd have to figure out what doing something with her sorry actually meant. Tomorrow, she'd have to start rebuilding herself into someone who deserved the second chance Daniel had given her. But tonight, she just sat with her daughter and thought about broken pieces and what you could build when you were brave enough to start over. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that made the city look like a photograph slowly losing its color. Daniel woke at 4:30 as always, his body trained to the rhythm of early shifts regardless of how exhausted he felt. The blood donation had taken more out of him than he'd admitted to anyone, including himself. His arms felt heavy, his head cotton-filled, but Mia needed breakfast and he had floors to clean. He found her already awake in the kitchen, sitting at their small table with a piece of paper and every crayon they owned spread out before her. "Daddy, look!" She held up her drawing with pride. "It's a card for Ellie. See, that's her in the hospital bed, and that's the flowers I'm going to bring her, and that's you giving her your blood, except I made the blood rainbow-colored because regular blood is kind of scary looking." Daniel smiled despite his exhaustion. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. She's going to love it. Do you think she'll really want to be my friend, even though she's rich and we're not?" The question hit Daniel harder than it should have. 7 years old, and Mia already understood the dividing lines the world drew between people. "Money doesn't matter when it comes to friends," he said, kneeling beside her chair. "What matters is if you're kind to each other, if you make each other laugh, if you're there when things are hard. Like you were there when Ellie needed blood?" Exactly like that. Mia studied his face with those 2 old eyes. "Are you scared to see that lady again, the one who was mean?" Daniel considered lying, decided against it. "A little bit, but sometimes we have to do things even when they're scary. Because being brave isn't about not being scared, it's about being scared and doing it anyway." Mia recited his own words back to him with perfect 7-year-old solemnity. Mommy used to say that too. She did, and she was right. Daniel kissed the top of Mia's head. "Now finish your card. We have a few hours before we need to leave." The morning shift at Titan Tech felt different. Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on why until Marcus, the security guard, pulled him aside near the executive elevators. "Danny, word's gotten around about what you did, about the blood donation for the CEO's kid." Marcus's expression was concerned. "Some of the guys are saying you're trying to get special treatment, that you're playing some kind of angle." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I'm not playing any angle. A child needed blood. I had the right type, that's all." "I believe you, man, but you know how people talk." Marcus glanced around, lowering his voice. "And there's something else. Mrs. Pierce apparently walked out of a major board meeting the day before yesterday, just left in the middle of her presentation. Some of the executives are saying she's unstable, that she can't handle the pressure. They're circling. That's not my business." "Maybe not. But if they force her out, the new CEO might not be so understanding about janitors who donate blood to the old CEO's kid. If you know what I mean." Marcus squeezed Daniel's shoulder. "Just be careful. Corporate politics can get ugly." After Marcus walked away, Daniel stood alone in the pristine lobby, his reflection multiplied in the polished marble. He thought about what Alexandra had asked him yesterday. What should I do? And his response, I can't tell you that. But maybe he should have tried. Because now, looking at the building around him, the hierarchy literally built into its architecture, the executive floors above, the service areas below, he realized that changing a person was impossible if you didn't also change the system they existed in. The morning crawled past. Daniel cleaned mechanically, his mind elsewhere. At 11:30, he clocked out, went home to change, and picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's apartment. You look tired, Mr. Daniel, Mrs. Chen said in her accented English as she handed Mia over. You taking care of yourself? I'm fine, Mrs. Chen, thank you. She clearly didn't believe him, but didn't push. You good man, that little girl lucky to have your blood. On the bus to St. Vincent's, Mia clutched her crayon drawing and peppered Daniel with questions. What if Ellie doesn't like me? What if I say something wrong? What if she thinks my card is babyish? What if… Mia, Daniel took her hand. Remember what we talked about? About being yourself? That if people don't like me when I'm being myself, then they weren't going to be good friends anyway. Exactly. So just be you. That's all you need to do. But as they walked through the hospital's automatic doors, Daniel felt his own anxiety rising. The ICU was on the 7th floor. They rode the elevator in silence, Mia pressed against his side, both of them preparing for something neither could quite name. The ICU waiting room was empty except for one person. Alexandra Pierce sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, her phone in her hands but her eyes unfocused, staring at nothing. She was wearing jeans, actual jeans, and a simple blue sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger than she had in the cafeteria yesterday. Vulnerable. She looked up as they entered, and something complicated crossed her face. Daniel. Hi. Thank you for coming. Her eyes moved to Mia. And you must be Mia. Mia, who had been nervous on the elevator, suddenly straightened up with complete confidence. I brought Ellie a card. I made it myself. And I'm really glad your daughter is okay because my daddy was super brave to give her his blood, even though it made him really pale and tired. Alexandra's expression softened. He was incredibly brave. And that card is beautiful. Would you like to meet Ellie? Yes, please. Mia, Daniel said gently. Remember what we talked about? Hospital manners. Quiet voices, gentle hands, and if anyone says we need to leave, we leave right away without arguing. Mia recited the rules perfectly, then looked at Alexandra. My daddy taught me that because hospitals are serious places where people need to rest. Your daddy is very wise. Alexandra stood, and Daniel saw how exhausted she looked. Before we go in, Ellie's still weak. She tires easily. If she starts to fade, I'll need to end the visit. We understand, Daniel said. Alexandra led them through the ICU doors, past nurses' stations and the soft beeping of monitors to a room at the end of the hallway. She paused with her hand on the door. She's been asking about you constantly since I told her you were coming. Fair warning, my daughter has no filter and will probably ask you extremely personal questions. Mia grinned. Same. Alexandra smiled, a real smile that transformed her face, and pushed open the door. Ellie Pierce was sitting up in bed, surrounded by what looked like every stuffed animal in the Western Hemisphere. Her blonde hair had been brushed into pigtails, and despite the paleness of her skin and the IV in her arm, her eyes were bright with anticipation. Are you Daniel? She asked immediately. Are you the one who gave me blood? I am. Daniel stepped forward, suddenly uncertain. What did you say to a child you'd saved? How did that conversation even work? But Ellie didn't give him time to overthink. Thank you. Mommy says I would have died if you didn't help. That's really big. Like, really, really big. You're welcome, Ellie. I'm glad I could help. And you must be Mia. Ellie's attention shifted with the rapid-fire focus of a 9-year-old. Do you like Frozen? Because I love Frozen. Olaf is my favorite. Who's your favorite? Elsa, Mia said, stepping forward and handing over her drawing. I made you this. It's you getting better. See, those are the rainbow blood cells making you strong again. Ellie took the drawing with reverence. This is the best card anyone's ever given me. Look, Mommy, look at the rainbow blood. Alexandra moved to her daughter's bedside, her hand automatically checking Ellie's forehead for fever. "It's beautiful, Mia. That was very thoughtful." "Can Mia sit on my bed, please? We need to discuss important frozen theories." Daniel looked at Alexandra, who looked at a nurse who'd just entered to check vitals. The nurse smiled. "As long as you're gentle and don't jostle the IV, I think that would be fine." Mia climbed carefully onto the bed, and within seconds the two girls were deep in animated conversation about whether Elsa's Ice Palace had a bathroom and what flavor of ice cream Olaf would be if he could be an ice cream flavor. Daniel and Alexandra stood awkwardly near the door, watching their daughters connect with the effortless ease of childhood. "She seems good," Daniel said quietly, "stronger than I expected. The transfusion made a huge difference. Dr. Chen says if she continues improving, we can go home Monday." Alexandra's voice caught. "Because of you. We don't have to keep doing this. You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do." Alexandra turned to face him. "Because gratitude isn't just about saying thank you. It's about—" She paused, searching for words. "It's about letting someone know that what they did mattered, that it changed things, and what you did changed everything." Before Daniel could respond, Ellie called out, "Daddy, can you come here? Mia and I need a grown-up opinion." Daniel glanced at Alexandra, confused. "She means you," Ellie said, as if it were obvious. "You gave me blood, so you're kind of like a temporary bonus dad. That's how biology works." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. "I'm honored," he said, moving to the bedside. "What's the question?" "Do you think Kristoff was always in love with Anna, or did it happen gradually throughout the movie?" Ellie asked with complete seriousness. Mia added, "Daddy's really good at analyzing character development. He's an engineer, so he understands structure." "Was an engineer," Daniel corrected automatically. "Was." Ellie tilted her head. "Why not anymore?" And there it was, the question Daniel had learned to deflect, to avoid, to redirect. But something about Ellie's direct gaze, about Mia's presence beside her, about Alexandra standing quietly near the window, made him answer honestly. "Because sometimes life gives you choices that aren't really choices. My wife got sick and died, and I had to decide between my career and taking care of Mia. I chose Mia. I'd choose her 1,000 times over, but it meant I couldn't be an engineer anymore." Ellie processed this with a child's blunt logic. "That's sad, but also kind of beautiful. Like in Beauty and the Beast, when Belle trades herself for her father, you traded your job for Mia." "I guess I did." "Was your wife nice?" Ellie asked. "What was her name?" "Sarah. And she was the nicest person I ever knew." Mia leaned against Daniel's side. "She used to make really good pancakes, and she sang off-key, but she didn't care. And she always knew when Daddy was sad, even when he was pretending not to be." "She sounds perfect," Ellie said. Then, with the brutal honesty of a sick child, "I'm glad you still have Mia, even though Sarah's gone. My dad left because he said having a sick kid was too stressful, so now it's just me and Mommy." The room went very quiet. Alexandra's back was rigid near the window, her shoulders tense. "I'm sorry, Ellie," Daniel said gently. "That must have been really hard." "It was, but Mommy says some people break when things get hard, and some people get stronger. She got stronger." Ellie looked at her mother with pure love. "She's the strongest person I know." Alexandra turned from the window, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. She just stood there, broken open by her daughter's faith. "Even when she's grumpy?" Mia asked seriously. "My daddy gets grumpy sometimes when he's tired from work, but he's still the best daddy." "Even when she's grumpy," Ellie confirmed. "Even when she forgets to eat lunch because she's on work calls. Even when she falls asleep in the hospital chair and snores really loud." "I do not snore," Alexandra protested, but she was smiling through tears. "You do, Mommy. It's okay. Everyone has flaws. You taught me that." Daniel watched this exchange and understood something fundamental. That Alexandra Pierce, the CEO, and Alexandra Pierce, the mother, were two completely different people. And the second one was trying to figure out how to exist in a world that only valued the first. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but Ellie, it's time for your afternoon meds and rest. She needs to sleep for a bit," she said to the room at large. But we were just getting to the important stuff, Ellie protested. We haven't even talked about whether Hans was evil the whole time or if he genuinely changed his mind halfway through. We can continue the debate another time, Daniel said, standing. You need to rest and get strong. Will you come back? Ellie's voice was suddenly small. Both of you? Daniel looked at Alexandra, who nodded almost imperceptibly. If your mom says it's okay, we'd love to, Daniel said. Please, Mommy? Of course, baby. Alexandra moved to the bed, kissing Ellie's forehead. Now take your medicine and sleep. I'll be right here. Mia carefully climbed off the bed and gave Ellie an awkward but heartfelt hug. You're really nice. I'm glad you didn't die. Me too, Ellie said seriously. And Mia? Thank you for the card. I'm going to keep it forever. In the hallway, after the nurse had ushered them out and closed the door, Mia looked up at Daniel with shining eyes. Daddy, she's the best. Can she really be my friend, even after she's not sick anymore? I think she'd like that very much. Mia turned to Alexandra. Your daughter is really smart and funny and brave. Thank you, Mia. Your dad raised you very well. He's the best. Mia said it with absolute conviction, then added, Are you still sad about being mean to him? Mia, Daniel said sharply, but Alexandra knelt down so she was eye level with Mia. Yes, I am. What I did was wrong, and I'm very sorry about it. Your dad deserved better. Mia studied her seriously. But you're trying to be better now? I am. Okay then, Mommy used to say that messing up is how we learn what not to do next time. Mia paused. Also, she said that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. I don't really understand that part yet, but Daddy says I will when I'm older. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears again. Your mommy was very wise. I know. Mia took Daniel's hand. Daddy, can we get ice cream on the way home? Hospital visits are stressful and ice cream helps. Daniel laughed despite everything. Yes, sweetheart, we can get ice cream. As they walked toward the elevators, Alexandra called out, Daniel, wait! He turned. She was standing in the hallway, backlit by the fluorescent lights, looking lost. I have a board meeting Monday morning. They're going to try to push me out because I left the Q4 presentation. And honestly, part of me wants to let them. Part of me is so tired of fighting, of pretending, of being the person they need me to be. She took a breath. But I keep thinking about what you said, about building systems that allow cruelty. And I realized if I leave, nothing changes. The next CEO will be just like I was, or worse. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I think I need to stop apologizing to you and start doing something that matters, something that changes things for everyone, not just for me. She paused. Would you be willing to help me? Not as my janitor, as someone who understands what it's like to be invisible in a system designed to keep you that way. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, Mia's hand warm in his. He thought about Marcus's warning that morning, about corporate politics, about the danger of getting involved in something so far above his pay grade. Then he thought about Ellie calling him a temporary bonus dad, about Mia's drawing of rainbow blood, about the way Alexandra had knelt down to accept criticism from a 7-year-old. What exactly are you proposing? He asked carefully. I don't know yet, but I want you to help me figure it out. I want to build something at Titan Tech that acknowledges that people like you, parents, caregivers, people who've sacrificed their careers for their families, deserve support, deserve respect, deserve more than the scraps we currently offer. Alexandra's voice grew stronger. I want to create a program that changes the culture, and I can't do that without someone who's actually lived it. You're asking a janitor to help redesign corporate policy? I'm asking a father, an engineer, and a human being who gave blood until he almost passed out to help me be better than I've been. There's a difference. Mia tugged on Daniel's hand. Daddy, you should do it. That way other daddies and mommies won't have to be as tired as you. From the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. Okay, he said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. First, this isn't charity. If you're asking for my time and expertise, you pay me for it. Consultant rate, not janitor rate. Daniel was surprised by his own boldness, but he continued. Second, This has to be real, not a PR stunt, not something you announce and then forget. If we're doing this, we commit to actually changing things. Agreed. What else? Third, you don't do this alone. You find other people in the company who are struggling, who are invisible, who have ideas but no platform. You listen to them, you amplify them, you build something that outlasts both of us. Alexandra nodded slowly. I can do that. But Daniel, I need something from you too. What? I need you to be honest with me. When I'm slipping back into old patterns, when I'm prioritizing the wrong things, when I'm becoming the person who yelled at you in that lobby, I need you to call me out. Can you do that? Daniel thought about it, really thought about it. What she was asking wasn't small. It was risky and complicated and could blow up in both their faces. But he thought about Mia, growing up in a world that would judge her by her father's job title. He thought about all the other single parents working 3 jobs, drowning in bills, invisible to the people they served. I can do that, he said. They shook hands in the hospital hallway, 2 people from different worlds, agreeing to try to build a bridge. That evening, after ice cream and dinner and tucking Mia into bed, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and tried to process everything that had happened. In less than 48 hours, his entire life had shifted on its axis. He was still a janitor. He was still broke. He was still exhausted. But something had changed. His phone buzzed. A text from Alexandra. Thank you for bringing Mia today. Ellie hasn't smiled that much in months. And thank you for agreeing to help. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I promise I won't waste it. Daniel stared at the message for a long time before responding. Everyone deserves a second chance. The question is what we do with it. See you Monday. But Monday felt both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. Because Daniel knew that what Alexandra was proposing, taking on the board, changing corporate culture, building something new, could either be the beginning of real change or the spectacular collapse of good intentions. He thought about his conversation with Ellie, about how some people break and some people get stronger, about how Sarah used to say that the world changed one choice at a time, one act of courage after another, until suddenly you looked back and realized everything was different. In her hospital room, Alexandra sat in the uncomfortable chair beside Ellie's bed, watching her daughter sleep. The monitors beeped steadily, reassuring. Dr. Chen had said Ellie could go home Monday if she continued improving. Home, where Alexandra would have to figure out how to balance being a mother and fighting for her job. But she wasn't fighting for her job, she realized. She was fighting for the chance to transform it into something worth keeping. Her phone sat in her lap, open to a document she'd started titled Support Initiative Proposals. She'd been working on it for the past hour, trying to articulate what Daniel had made her understand, that true change required dismantling the structures that made cruelty easy. She'd thought corporate success meant ruthless efficiency, meant cutting waste, meant optimizing every metric. But she'd forgotten that people weren't metrics, that behind every job title was a human being with a story as complicated as her own. Daniel had a daughter to raise alone. Alexandra had a daughter fighting for her life. Somewhere in the space between those two truths was the possibility of understanding, of connection, of building something that acknowledged they were all just doing their best in an impossible world. The board meeting Monday would be brutal. Marcus Holloway would come armed with arguments about fiduciary responsibility, about the need for steady leadership, about how emotional decisions had no place in the boardroom. But Alexandra was done being the kind of leader who checked her humanity at the door, done being the kind of CEO who valued quarterly profits over human dignity, done being the woman who could yell at a janitor without seeing him as a person. She looked at her sleeping daughter and made a promise in the quiet dark of the ICU. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, I will build something worth believing in, something worth fighting for, something that makes you proud. And if they forced her out, if Marcus Holloway and his allies succeeded in pushing her aside, then at least she'd go down swinging for something that mattered. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line, Emergency Board Session, Monday, 9 a.m., mandatory attendance. Alexandra read through the email, saw the thinly veiled threats, the implications that her leadership was in question, that her actions had consequences. She replied with 3 words, I'll be there. Then she added a second email, this one to Jennifer, her assistant. I need you to compile a list of every single parent employee at Titan Tech, every caregiver, every person who's working multiple jobs or facing medical debt or struggling with dependent care. I need names, stories, and permission to share those stories. We're going to build something, and I need to show the board exactly who we've been failing. It was nearly midnight when she finally closed her laptop. Ellie stirred in her sleep, and Alexandra reached out, smoothing back her daughter's hair. "We're going to be okay, baby," she whispered. "I promise. We're going to build something better." And for the first time in 8 months of hospitals and fear and exhausting uncertainty, Alexandra actually believed it. Monday morning arrived with rain that turned the city streets into rivers of reflected light. Daniel woke at his usual 4:30, but this time anxiety kept him from falling back asleep. Today wasn't just another shift cleaning floors. Today, he was supposed to meet Alexandra before the board meeting to discuss the proposals she'd been working on all weekend. He'd received 3 emails from her since Friday, each one longer and more detailed than the last, filled with ideas and questions and a kind of desperate energy that reminded him of his own engineering days, when he'd stay up all night solving problems that mattered. The latest email had arrived at 2 a.m. with the subject line, "I think I've got it. Please tell me if I'm completely off base." Daniel had read through her proposal twice, making notes in the margins. She was thinking bigger than he'd expected, not just a support program for single parents, but a complete restructuring of how Titan Tech approached work-life balance, benefits, and what she called human-centered leadership. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. But it was real. That much was clear. Mia was still asleep when he left for work at 5 a.m., leaving her in Mrs. Chen's care with a note promising he'd be home early. The bus ride to Titan Tech felt longer than usual, his mind spinning through everything that could go wrong today. Marcus's warning from Friday kept echoing in his head. Corporate politics can get ugly. The building's lobby was empty when Daniel arrived, just the way he liked it. But today the silence felt ominous rather than peaceful. He started his route mechanically, pushing the cleaning cart, his mind elsewhere. At 7:15, his phone buzzed. "Alexandra, I'm here early. Conference room 12B when you have a chance? I know you're working, but I really need to run through this with someone before facing the board." Daniel glanced around the empty lobby, made a decision, and texted back. "Give me 10 minutes. Conference room 12B was one of the smaller meeting spaces on the 3rd floor. Glass walls, modern furniture, a whiteboard covered in Alexandra's handwriting from what must have been a late-night planning session. She was standing at the window when he arrived, wearing a sharp gray suit that looked like armor, her dark hair pulled back severely, but her hands were shaking as she held a coffee cup. "You came," she said, turning. "I wasn't sure if you could get away." "I have a few minutes. What do you need?" Alexandra gestured at the whiteboard, which was covered in diagrams, bullet points, and what looked like financial projections. "I need you to tell me if this is insane, if I'm proposing something that sounds good but can't actually work in the real world." Daniel moved closer, studying the board. She'd broken down her proposal into 3 main initiatives: flexible scheduling and remote work options for caregivers, an emergency support fund for employees facing medical or family crises, and a mentorship program pairing executive leadership with workers across all levels of the company to break down the hierarchical barriers that made people like him invisible. "This is good," Daniel said slowly. "Really good. But Alexandra, this is going to cost money, real money. How are you planning to sell that to the board?" "By showing them what it costs not to do it." She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. "I had Jennifer pull data all weekend. We lose an average of 47 employees per quarter, people who quit because they can't balance work and caregiving, or because a medical crisis bankrupts them, or because they just burn out trying to do everything. It costs us an average of $50,000 to replace and train each employee. That's $2.3 million per quarter in turnover costs alone." Daniel whistled softly. "And your proposal?" "Would cost approximately $1.8 million per year to implement and maintain. It pays for itself in reduced turnover in less than 6 months, and that's not even counting the benefits of improved morale, productivity, and company reputation." Alexandra's voice was gaining confidence as she walked through the numbers. "But here's the thing, I'm not selling this as a cost-saving measure. I'm selling it as the right thing to do. And I need to know if that's naive. It might be, Daniel admitted. Boards care about profit, not principles. Then I'll give them both. Alexandra's jaw set. I'll show them the numbers first, then I'll tell them about you, about how a janitor saved my daughter's life, and made me realize we've built a company that treats people as disposable. And I'll ask them point blank, what kind of company do we want to be? Daniel felt something tight in his chest. They're going to fight you on this, especially if they're already looking for reasons to push you out. I know, that's why I need you there. What? Alexandra turned to face him fully. I need you in that meeting, not as a janitor, as the consultant I've hired to help redesign our employee support systems. I need them to hear your story directly. I need them to understand that this isn't abstract. It's about real people. Alexandra, I can't. I'm working. I have a shift to finish. I already cleared it with your supervisor. You're off the clock as of 8 a.m. She pulled out a folder and handed it to him. This is a consulting contract. 30 days, $50 an hour, with an option to extend. You'll work with me and the HR team to design and implement the new programs, if the board approves them. Daniel opened the folder, staring at numbers that would change his life. $50 an hour. Even part-time, that was more than he made in a week of janitorial work. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Because you were right. Sorry isn't enough. Action is what matters. Alexandra's voice was firm. And because I can't do this without you. I can present all the data in the world, but I'm still the CEO who abandoned her post to save her daughter. I'm still the woman who got emotional and left a meeting. They're going to use that against me. But you... She paused. You're the person who gave blood until you almost passed out for a child you'd never met. You're the father who sacrificed his career for his daughter. You're the engineer who understands systems and how to fix them. They can't dismiss you the way they can dismiss me. Daniel looked at the contract, then at Alexandra, seeing the desperation and determination in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting for this program. She was fighting for her right to be human in a world that demanded she be a machine. Okay, he said, but I'm not changing clothes. They're going to see me exactly as I am, a janitor in a gray uniform who happens to have ideas worth listening to. Alexandra smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. Perfect. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Alexandra walked Daniel through every slide, every argument, every potential objection. She'd done her homework, compiled testimonials from employees struggling with caregiving, research on corporate support programs from other companies, financial models showing return on investment. The key is Marcus Holloway, she said as they reviewed the board member list. He's the one leading the charge against me. Former military, believes in hierarchy and discipline, thinks emotional decisions are weak decisions. If we can get him on board, the others will follow. And if we can't, then I'm probably out, and this dies with me. Alexandra's voice was matter-of-fact, but Daniel could see the fear underneath. But I'd rather lose my job fighting for something that matters than keep it by staying silent. At 8:45, they rode the elevator to the executive floor in tense silence. Daniel had been in this building for 3 years and never once set foot on the 23rd floor. The elevator doors opened onto a world of polished wood and expensive art. So far removed from the service corridors, he knew that it felt like a different planet. Alexandra's assistant, Jennifer, was waiting outside the boardroom. She took one look at Daniel in his janitor's uniform, and her eyebrows shot up, but she covered her surprise quickly. They're all here, Jennifer said quietly to Alexandra. And they're not happy. Holloway's been talking to the others for the past 20 minutes. Whatever he's saying, it's working. Then let's not keep them waiting. Alexandra straightened her shoulders, transformed before Daniel's eyes into the CEO he'd first met, cold, controlled, powerful. But now he knew what that armor was protecting. The boardroom was exactly what Daniel expected. Massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 8 people sat around the table, all turning to look as Alexandra entered with Daniel behind her. Marcus Holloway was easy to identify, late 60s, silver hair cut military short, eyes like a hawk assessing prey. He was the first to speak. Alexandra, good of you to join us. His tone made it clear it was anything but good. And you've brought, forgive me, I don't believe we've been introduced. This is Daniel Cross, Alexandra said, her voice steady. He's a consultant I've hired to help develop new employee support initiatives. He'll be presenting with me today? A consultant. Holloway's eyes raked over Daniel's uniform. Is there a reason your consultant is dressed as a janitor? Because I am a janitor, Daniel said before Alexandra could respond. I've been working at Titan Tech for 3 years, but I'm also a father, a former engineer, and as of today, someone who's going to help this company do better by its employees. The room went silent. Daniel could feel every eye on him, could see the mixture of confusion, disdain, and curiosity on the board members' faces. Another board member, an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair, leaned forward. Alexandra, perhaps you should explain what's going on here. We were told this was a meeting to discuss your recent absence in fitness for leadership. It is, Alexandra said. And the best way to discuss my fitness for leadership is to show you what I learned during that absence. She clicked a button, and the presentation appeared on the screen behind her. 4 days ago, I left our Q4 presentation meeting because I received a call that my daughter was dying. She needed an emergency blood transfusion, and the hospital's supply was critically low. If we hadn't found a donor within the hour, she would have died. She paused, let that sink in. Holloway's expression didn't change, but a few other board members shifted uncomfortably. The person who saved my daughter was Daniel, a man I had publicly humiliated that same morning for the crime of having his cleaning cart block my elevator. Alexandra's voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the emotion underneath. He gave 2 units of blood, far more than is typically safe, without asking for anything in return. And in doing so, he made me realize something fundamental about the company we've built. She advanced to the next slide, which showed a simple question in large letters. What kind of company are we? For the past 3 years, we've focused on efficiency, profit margins, and shareholder value. And we've succeeded. Our stock price is up 32%, our revenue has grown every quarter, and we're positioned as industry leaders. But we've done it by creating a culture where people are disposable, where someone like Daniel, a talented engineer who sacrificed his career to care for his dying wife and his daughter, ends up pushing a mop because we offer no support for employees facing personal crises. With all due respect, Holloway interrupted, his voice sharp, this is exactly the kind of emotional reasoning that concerns me. Your daughter was sick, you were understandably upset, and now you're letting guilt drive business decisions. But Titan Tech is not a charity. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. I agree completely, Alexandra said calmly, which is why I'm not proposing charity. I'm proposing smart business. She advanced to the financial slides. We lose 47 employees per quarter to burnout, caregiving conflicts, and medical crises. Replacement costs average $50,000 per employee. That's a hemorrhage of $2.3 million every 3 months. Money we're throwing away because we treat people as interchangeable parts. She walked through the numbers methodically, showing the cost of turnover, the expense of training, the hidden impacts of low morale and high stress. Daniel watched the board members' faces shift as data replaced emotion. Now, let me show you what I'm proposing. Alexandra moved to the next section. A comprehensive employee support program with 3 core elements: flexible scheduling for caregivers, an emergency assistance fund for medical and family crises, and a mentorship program that breaks down hierarchical barriers. Total annual cost, $1.8 million. Return on investment, break even in less than 6 months with ongoing benefits in reduced turnover, improved productivity, and enhanced company reputation. These are projections, Holloway said dismissively, based on assumptions. Based on data from companies that have implemented similar programs, Alexandra countered. I've included case studies from 7 different corporations in the materials Jennifer distributed. Every single one saw measurable improvements in retention and employee satisfaction. And every single one of those companies, Holloway shot back, was responding to public pressure or trying to improve poor reputations. We don't have that problem. Why should we spend money fixing something that isn't broken? This was the moment Daniel had been waiting for. He stood, and all eyes turned to him. Because it is broken, Daniel said quietly. You just can't see it from up here. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I worked as an engineer at Hastings Technologies before my wife died. I was good at my job. Great, actually. But when Sarah got sick, I had a choice: keep my career or be there for my daughter. Hastings had no flexibility, no support, no understanding that employees are human beings with lives outside the office. So I quit, or got fired. The line was pretty blurry by the end. Daniel moved to stand beside Alexandra, facing the board directly. I lost my house, I lost my savings, I lost any chance of working in my field again because 3-year gaps on a resume are impossible to explain in a 5-minute interview. And I'm not unique. There are hundreds of employees at Titan Tech right now, maybe thousands, who are one crisis away from the same situation. You call it efficiency, we call it survival. That's very touching, Holloway said, his voice dripping with condescension. But personal sob stories don't change business realities. Companies exist to make profit, not to coddle employees who can't handle their responsibilities. Is that what you think I couldn't handle? Daniel's voice remained calm but gained an edge. I couldn't handle watching my wife die while trying to keep my daughter fed and housed. I couldn't handle a healthcare system that bankrupted us while claiming to save her. I couldn't handle working 80-hour weeks while grieving and parenting and trying not to collapse. He paused. Or maybe the system couldn't handle the reality that employees are human beings who sometimes need help. The kind-eyed woman spoke up again. Mr. Holloway, I think we should hear them out. Alexandra has prepared a comprehensive proposal, and dismissing it without consideration doesn't serve anyone's interests. I second that, another board member added, a younger man who'd been taking notes throughout. The retention data alone is worth examining. Holloway sat back, his expression stony. Fine, present your full proposal, but I reserve the right to call a vote on Alexandra's leadership regardless of what's presented here. Fair enough, Alexandra said. She spent the next 40 minutes walking through every detail of the proposal. The flexible scheduling program that would allow employees to adjust hours for caregiving needs, the emergency fund that would provide interest-free loans and grants for medical crises, the mentorship initiative that would pair executives with workers across all levels to foster understanding and break down barriers. Daniel added context throughout, explaining what each element would have meant for him, for his wife, for his daughter. He talked about the night spent calculating which bills to pay, the morning Sarah collapsed because she'd been rationing her medication to save money, the moment he realized his engineering degree was worthless because the system had no place for people who prioritized family over career. By the time they finished, 2 hours had passed. The board members sat in silence, processing everything they'd heard. Finally, the kind-eyed woman spoke. I have a question for Alexandra. This is clearly important to you, important enough to stake your position on. But I need to know, is this sustainable? Or is this a reaction to a personal crisis that will fade once the immediate emotions pass? Alexandra met her eyes. 3 weeks ago, I would have said the same thing you're thinking, that this is an emotional response that will fade. But Dr. Margaret Wu, that's exactly the problem. We've built a culture where caring about people is seen as weakness, where admitting that we're human, that we have families and fears and limits, is a liability. She paused. My daughter almost died, and the person who saved her was someone I'd dismissed as beneath my notice. If that doesn't fundamentally change how I lead this company, then I have no business leading it at all. That's what I'm afraid of, Holloway said coldly. That you've let a personal trauma cloud your judgment. That you're confusing good intentions with good business. He looked around the table. I move that we table this proposal and proceed to a vote on Alexandra's fitness for continued leadership. I second the motion to table, another board member said, one who'd been silent until now. Dr. Wu looked troubled. Marcus, that seems premature. We haven't even discussed the financial implications. We've discussed plenty. The question is simple. Do we want a CEO who makes decisions based on emotion or one who makes them based on logic? Holloway's voice was hard. Alexandra walked out of a critical meeting because of a personal emergency. She's now proposing we spend nearly $2 million on a program designed to make employees feel better about their choices. This isn't leadership, it's guilt. Daniel felt Alexandra tense beside him. This was the moment she'd been afraid of, the moment when her humanity would be used as a weapon against her. But before she could respond, Dr. Wu spoke again. Marcus, I've sat on this board for 12 years. I've watched us prioritize profit over people again and again, always with the justification that it's just business. But I've also watched our turnover rate climb, our employee satisfaction scores drop, and our reputation as a workplace deteriorate. Maybe it's time we admitted that how we treat people is business, that supporting our employees isn't charity, it's strategy. Margaret, you're letting emotion— I'm letting data inform my decision, Dr. Wu interrupted firmly. The numbers Alexandra presented are sound. The case studies are compelling. And frankly, the fact that we're even debating whether helping employees through medical crises is worth it tells me everything about what's broken in our culture. Another board member spoke up, a man in his 50s who'd been listening intently. I have to agree with Margaret. My son is a teacher. He and his wife had twins last year, and they nearly went bankrupt trying to manage childcare while both working. They're exactly the kind of people this program would help. And if we can do it while improving our bottom line, that's not emotion, that's smart business. The tide was turning. Daniel could see it in the way board members were looking at each other, the way the energy in the room was shifting. But Holloway wasn't done fighting. This is absurd. We're about to revolutionize our entire corporate structure because our CEO had a bad week? He stood, his voice rising. I've spent 40 years in business, and I can tell you with certainty that companies that prioritize feelings over profits don't survive. We have a responsibility— To what? Alexandra cut him off, her voice sharp. To shareholders? Fine. Let me ask you this. What do you think happens to stock price when news breaks that our turnover rate is 3 times the industry average? What happens when employees start speaking out about our toxic culture? What happens when we lose talented people like Daniel because we're too rigid to acknowledge that they're human? She leaned forward. You want to talk about responsibility to shareholders? Show me one, just one, piece of data that says treating people poorly is good for long-term stock value. Holloway's face flushed red. You're out of line. No, I'm finally in line with my values, with my daughter's expectations of who I am, with the kind of leader I want to be. Alexandra's voice was steady now, all doubt gone. You can call for a vote on my leadership. You can push me out. But if you do, I promise you, I will make sure every employee, every investor, every reporter knows exactly what this board stood for. That when given the choice between profit and people, you chose profit, and we'll see how that works out for the stock price. The room fell silent. It was a threat, clearly and deliberately made. But it was also the truth. Dr. Wu broke the silence. I'd like to propose an alternative to Marcus's motion. Let's pilot this program for 6 months. Start small, maybe with 1 department or division. Track the metrics Alexandra outlined. If it works, we expand. If it doesn't, we reevaluate. But we give it a real chance before making any decisions about leadership. I support that, the younger board member said immediately. As do I, added the man with twin grandbabies. One by one, board members voiced their support until only Holloway and 1 other member remained opposed. This is a mistake, Holloway said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. And when it fails, and it will fail, I will make sure everyone knows I opposed it. That's your prerogative, Alexandra said calmly. Jennifer, please note for the record that the board has approved a 6-month pilot program for the employee support initiatives presented today. Daniel Cross will serve as consulting lead, working with HR and department heads to design and implement the program. We'll report back monthly on progress and metrics. As the board members filed out, some stopping to shake Alexandra's hand or nod at Daniel, Holloway approached them one last time. You may have won today, he said quietly, but this isn't over. The minute your little experiment shows any sign of failure, I'll be there. And next time, you won't have a heartwarming story to hide behind. I'm not hiding, Alexandra said. I'm finally stepping out into the light. And Marcus, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm only afraid of becoming the person I was a week ago. After he left, Alexandra turned to Daniel, and suddenly the armor cracked. She was shaking, her eyes bright with unshed tears. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Daniel corrected. I just told my story. Your story changed everything. Alexandra sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. When you talked about choosing Mia over your career, when you made them see that it wasn't a failure of character but a failure of system, that's when I saw them shift. Daniel sat down across from her, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The adrenaline that had carried him through the meeting was fading, leaving him drained. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we build it. 6 months to prove this works. To show that treating people like human beings doesn't just make moral sense. It makes business sense." Alexandra looked at him seriously. "Are you ready for that? Because it's going to be hard work, and you're going to face pushback from people who think you don't belong here." "Ooh, I've been facing that pushback for 3 years," Daniel said. "The difference is now I have a chance to change things for people like me. For Mia. For all the kids whose parents are drowning trying to hold everything together." He paused. "So yes, I'm ready." They sat together in the empty boardroom as the rain continued to fall outside. Two people from different worlds who'd been brought together by crisis and blood and the slim possibility that something better was achievable. "Thank you," Alexandra said finally, "for believing this was possible when I wasn't sure I did." "Thank you for asking me to help build it," Daniel replied. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Mia asking when you come home. Says she wants to hear about your big meeting." Daniel smiled. "I need to go. My daughter's waiting." "Of course." Alexandra stood, extending her hand. "I'll have Jennifer set up a schedule for this week. We have a lot of work to do." They shook hands, CEO and janitor, consultant and client, two parents who understood that the most important work wasn't done in boardrooms, but in the small moments when you chose kindness over convenience, people over profit, hope over fear. As Daniel rode the bus home through the rain-soaked streets, his janitor's uniform still on, a consultant contract in his bag and $50 an hour in his future, he thought about everything that had changed in less than a week. About how one moment of choosing to help rather than hurt had set off a cascade of consequences neither he nor Alexandra could have predicted. He thought about Mia's question. "Are you still sad about being mean to him?" And Alexandra's answer, "Yes, I am. But I'm trying to be better now." That was all any of them could do, really. Acknowledge the hurt, try to be better, build something that made the next person's journey a little less impossible. The bus pulled up to his stop. Daniel stepped out into the rain, heading home to tell his daughter about the meeting, about standing in a boardroom in his gray uniform and making 8 people in expensive suits listen to what it meant to be invisible. About how sometimes the most revolutionary thing you could do was simply insist on being seen. Mia was waiting at the window when Daniel came home, her face pressed against the glass, breath fogging the pain. The moment she saw him, she flew to the door. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you were at a really important meeting with fancy people. Did you tell them about me? Did they listen? Are you still a janitor, or are you something else now?" Daniel scooped her up despite his exhaustion, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I'm still a janitor, but I'm also a consultant now, which means I get to help make the company better for people like us." "What's a consultant?" "Someone who helps solve problems." Mia pulled back to look at his face, her expression serious. "You've always been good at that, Daddy. Remember when my dollhouse broke and you fixed it with popsicle sticks and made it even better than before?" "I remember." "This is like that, right? Except instead of a dollhouse, you're fixing a whole company." Daniel laughed despite everything. "Yeah, sweetheart. It's exactly like that." The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of meetings and planning sessions, late nights and early mornings, the careful work of building something from nothing. Daniel found himself in conference rooms he'd only ever cleaned, sitting at tables he'd polished, contributing ideas that people actually listened to. It was disorienting, exhilarating, terrifying. The first real test came 2 weeks in, when he presented the flexible scheduling framework to department heads. He'd prepared meticulously, practiced his presentation with Mia as his audience, worn the one good shirt he owned instead of his janitor's uniform. But the moment he walked into the room, he could feel the resistance. These were middle managers who'd climbed the corporate ladder by never questioning the system, and here was a former janitor telling them they needed to change everything. "Let me get this straight," one manager said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "You want us to allow employees to work from home up to 3 days a week? To adjust their schedules around childcare? Do you have any idea how that will impact productivity? I do, actually, Daniel replied calmly. He pulled up a slide showing data from the pilot program they'd started in the IT department. Remote workers in our test group showed a 17% increase in productivity. Turns out when people aren't exhausted from commuting and don't have to choose between their jobs and their kids' doctor appointments, they work better. That's one department, and we're going to expand it carefully and methodically, tracking metrics every step of the way. Daniel clicked to the next slide. But here's what I need you all to understand. This isn't about being nice. It's about being smart. Every person in this room has lost talented employees because we couldn't accommodate their lives. How many times have you had to train a replacement because someone quit after having a baby? Or because they couldn't handle caring for an elderly parent and working 60-hour weeks? The room fell quiet. Daniel could see recognition on several faces. This program gives you tools to keep those people, to make them more loyal, more productive, more engaged. But it requires you to see them as human beings first and workers second. And I know that's hard. The system trained you not to see that. It trained me too when I was an engineer. He paused. But I'm telling you from the other side of that system that it's broken, and we have a chance to fix it. One manager, a woman in her 40s, raised her hand. I have a question. You mentioned you were an engineer. What made you leave that field? Daniel had been asked this question a dozen times in the past 2 weeks. Each time it got a little easier to answer and a little harder. My wife died, and I had a daughter who needed me more than I needed my career, but the company I worked for couldn't or wouldn't accommodate that. So I lost everything. He met the woman's eyes. I don't want anyone else to face that choice. No one should have to choose between the people they love and being able to pay rent. The woman nodded slowly. My sister went through something similar after her divorce. She's a nurse, a good one, but she had to go part-time because she couldn't afford childcare on her schedule. She makes half what she used to, and she's constantly stressed about money. If her hospital had something like this, exactly, Daniel said quietly. That's what we're trying to build. A system that acknowledges people have lives. That supporting them through the hard times isn't charity, it's investment. By the end of the meeting, he had tentative buy-in from 8 of the 12 managers. Not perfect, but it was progress. Alexandra was waiting in the hallway when he emerged, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. You didn't tell me you were going to bring up your wife, she said quietly. I wasn't planning to, it just happened. It was effective. I saw their faces change when you talked about losing everything. She paused. But Daniel, you don't have to relive your trauma to make this work. You don't owe anyone your pain. I'm not giving them my pain. I'm giving them context. Daniel leaned against the wall, suddenly tired. These are people who've never had to make impossible choices. They need to understand what's at stake. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. Ellie's been asking about you and Mia. She wants you both to come to dinner this weekend. Would that be okay? Daniel thought about it. In the chaos of the past weeks, he'd almost forgotten about the human connection that started all of this. The 2 little girls who'd bonded over Frozen and hospital rooms. Yeah, he said. I think Mia would love that. The dinner happened on Saturday evening at Alexandra's house in the hills. Daniel had been prepared for wealth, but the reality still took his breath away. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary. But Mia, bless her, was completely unbothered by the opulence. She walked in, looked around, and immediately said, Wow, your house is really big. Do you have a lot of people living here, or is it just you and Ellie? Ellie, who was looking healthier than Daniel had ever seen her, giggled. Just us. It's kind of too big, actually. Sometimes I get lost. That's silly. Houses shouldn't be confusing. Mia took Ellie's hand. Can you show me your room? I want to see if you have Frozen posters. The girls disappeared upstairs, leaving Daniel and Alexandra standing awkwardly in the massive foyer. Your daughter is remarkably self-possessed, Alexandra said with a smile. She's had to be. Growing up the way we did, she learned early that money doesn't make people better or worse. Just different. Daniel followed Alexandra into the kitchen, which looked like something from a magazine. How's Ellie doing? Really doing? Good. Really good. Alexandra started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Her counts are stable. We're still on the transplant list, but the doctors are optimistic that with continued transfusions and medication, she might not need it, and the new treatment protocol seems to be working. She paused, her hands stilling. Because of you. Because of your blood. Alexandra, we talked about this. I know, but standing here in my kitchen, making dinner with my daughter laughing upstairs, I need you to understand what you gave me. You gave me this moment, every moment I get with her from now on. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he did what he always did when emotions got too big. He redirected. What are we making? Pasta. Mia mentioned she likes spaghetti, and Ellie's been craving carbs since she got home from the hospital. Alexandra handed him a cutting board and vegetables. You chop. I'll handle the sauce, and we'll pretend this isn't surreal. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. It felt domestic in a way that made Daniel's chest tight. He hadn't cooked with someone else since Sarah died, hadn't shared kitchen space, hadn't navigated the dance of preparing a meal together. How's the program going? Alexandra asked as she stirred the pot. I know you had the department head meeting this week. It's going, slowly. There's a lot of resistance from middle management. They've spent their careers in a system that rewards overwork and punishes human need. Asking them to change overnight is, he shrugged. It's hard. But you're making progress. Some. The IT pilot is going well. Turnover is down. Productivity is up. We're starting to get requests from other departments wanting to join. Daniel finished chopping the vegetables and slid them toward Alexandra. But there's pushback too. Anonymous complaints about special treatment, concerns that remote work means people are slacking off, the usual fears. Marcus Holloway's been quiet, Alexandra said. Too quiet. I don't trust it. Neither do I, but we keep moving forward. That's all we can do. Dinner was chaotic and wonderful. The girls dominated the conversation, telling elaborate stories about a fantasy world they'd created where they were princesses who solved mysteries. Daniel and Alexandra mostly listened, occasionally exchanging amused glances across the table. At one point, Ellie turned to Daniel with her characteristic directness. Are you and Mommy friends now? Like real friends, not just work friends? Daniel glanced at Alexandra, who looked as uncertain as he felt. I think so, he said carefully. What do you think makes someone a real friend? When you tell them true things, when you help them even when it's hard, when you don't pretend to be someone you're not. Ellie looked between them. You do all those things. So yeah, you're real friends. After dinner, while the girls watched Frozen for what Mia claimed was the approximately millionth time, Daniel and Alexandra sat on the back deck overlooking the city. The lights spread out below them like a constellation fallen to earth. She's right, you know, Alexandra said quietly. About us being real friends. I don't have many of those. People who see past the CEO and just see me. That goes both ways. I don't have many people who see past the janitor and the tragedy and just see me either. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. Can I ask you something? Alexandra's voice was hesitant. That day in the hospital when you agreed to give blood, were you angry? At me? At the situation? At the unfairness of it all? Daniel considered the question carefully. No, not angry, maybe resigned, like the universe had a sense of humor, putting me in a position to save the daughter of the woman who'd just humiliated me. He turned to look at her. But Ellie wasn't you. She was just a kid who needed help, and I couldn't not help even if I'd wanted to. I don't know if I could have done the same, if our positions had been reversed. Alexandra's voice was raw with honesty. I'd like to think I would have, but I don't know. And that terrifies me. That I might have become someone who would let a child die because their parent had been cruel to me. But you didn't become that person. You're here. You're changing things. That has to count for something. Does it? I mean, I only changed because I was forced to confront what I'd become. If Ellie hadn't gotten sick, if you hadn't been the donor, I'd still be that woman in the lobby, treating people as obstacles instead of humans. Maybe, or maybe you would have had a different wake-up call. People don't change just because of one moment. They change because they're ready to change and something gives them permission. Daniel stretched his legs out in front of him. You were ready. The circumstances just provided the catalyst. You're very generous with your interpretations. I'm realistic. We're all capable of cruelty. We're all capable of grace. The question is which one we choose when the moment demands a decision. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I got an email from Holloway this afternoon. He's calling for a full board review of the pilot program. Wants to examine every expense, every metric, every decision we've made. That was inevitable. I know, but Daniel, he's going to come after you. Your background, your qualifications, your right to be in this position. He's going to try to discredit the program by discrediting you. Let him try. Daniel's voice was calm. I'm not hiding who I am or where I came from. If he wants to argue that janitors shouldn't have opinions about corporate culture, he's welcome to make that case. I'll be happy to explain to the board exactly why that attitude is the problem. You're braver than I am. No, I'm just too tired to be scared anymore. I've already lost everything that mattered once. This job, this program, it's important, but it's not worth compromising who I am. And if they can't accept that, then they don't deserve what we're trying to build. Inside, the movie reached the crescendo of Let It Go, and they could hear the girls singing along at the top of their lungs, slightly off key, but absolutely committed. Alexandra laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. 3 months ago, I couldn't remember the last time I heard Ellie sing. She was too weak, too sick, too tired, and now listen to her. She's a fighter, like her mom. You keep saying things like that, kind things, after everything I did to you. Because you're making it true. You're fighting for something that matters. You're using your power to help people instead of hurt them. That deserves acknowledgement. Daniel stood, stretching. But we should probably rescue that movie before they rewind it and watch it again. The evening ended with Mia falling asleep on Alexandra's couch, exhausted from singing and playing and being 7 years old with a friend who understood what it was like to be scared. Daniel carried her to the car, her head on his shoulder, her small hand clutching his shirt. Thank you for tonight, he said to Alexandra, who'd walked them out. Mia needed this. I needed this. Same. And Daniel? Alexandra hesitated. Whatever happens with Holloway, with the board, with all of it, I want you to know that meeting you changed my life, not just because you saved Ellie, but because you showed me what it looks like to live with integrity, to make the hard choices and still be kind. You're doing the same thing. Every day you fight for this program, you're making that choice. He drove home through the dark streets, Mia sleeping in the back seat, his mind spinning through everything that had happened. 6 weeks ago, he was just a janitor trying to survive. Now he was helping reshape corporate culture, having dinner with CEOs, being paid consultant rates to share his expertise. But the strangest part wasn't the change in circumstances. It was the change in himself. The way standing up in that boardroom, insisting on being seen, had reminded him that he was more than his circumstances. That losing his career hadn't erased his knowledge, his skills, his worth. The board review happened 3 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday morning that felt heavy with consequence. Daniel arrived early, dressed in the same good shirt he'd worn to his first department head meeting, his notes organized in the leather folder Alexandra had given him as a thank you gift. Marcus Holloway was already in the boardroom when Daniel entered, surrounded by stacks of printed reports and wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. Mr. Cross, good of you to arrive on time. I hope you're prepared to answer some questions about this program you've convinced Alexandra to champion. I'm prepared to present the data and let it speak for itself, Daniel replied calmly. The other board members filed in over the next 10 minutes. Dr. Margaret Wu gave Daniel an encouraging nod. The younger board member, whose name Daniel had learned was James Chen, offered a quick smile. But most of the others looked guarded, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Alexandra was the last to arrive, her expression composed, but her hands gripping her portfolio tightly. She took her seat at the head of the table and called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I know Marcus has raised concerns about the employee support program, and I think it's important we address them comprehensively. She nodded to Daniel. Daniel's going to walk us through the results of the 6-week pilot, and then we'll open the floor for questions and discussion. Daniel stood and connected his laptop to the presentation screen. He'd spent the past 3 days preparing for this, anticipating every attack, every objection, every attempt to discredit the work they'd done. He started with the numbers. Cold, hard data that couldn't be argued with. Turnover in the IT pilot department had dropped by 43%. Employee satisfaction scores were up 31%. Productivity metrics showed a 14% increase. And the Emergency Assistance Fund had prevented 3 employees from quitting, employees whose replacement costs alone would have exceeded the fund's entire quarterly budget. "These are impressive numbers," Dr. Wu said when he paused. "Much better than I expected for such a short pilot period." "They're self-reported numbers from a friendly department," Holloway cut in. "Of course, people are going to say they're happier when they know they're part of a special program getting special attention. This is basic Hawthorne effect, results that won't hold up once the novelty wears off." "That's why we built in control mechanisms," Daniel replied. He advanced to the next slide. "We compared our pilot department to 3 similar departments that maintained standard policies. The control department showed a 2% drop in satisfaction and a 12% increase in turnover over the same period. The difference is statistically significant and expensive," Holloway shot back. He pulled out one of his printed reports. "According to my analysis, this program costs the company approximately $47,000 per month. That's over $500,000 annually, assuming we only run 1 pilot. If we expand company-wide, we're looking at costs in excess of $3 million. "Your analysis is incomplete," Alexandra said, her voice sharp. "You're only counting direct costs. The flexible work infrastructure, the emergency fund disbursements, the administrative overhead. You're not accounting for the savings from reduced turnover, improved productivity, or enhanced company reputation. Because those are projections, not actual returns. No, they're measured results." Daniel pulled up his final slide, the one he'd debated including because it made things personal in a way that might backfire. But looking at Holloway's smug expression, he decided it was worth the risk. "This is Janine Martinez. She's worked in our IT department for 7 years. Single mother of 3, 2 jobs, barely scraping by. 6 weeks ago, her youngest son was diagnosed with leukemia. Without the Emergency Assistance Fund, she would have had to quit to care for him. We gave her a grant to cover 3 months of childcare and medical expenses, plus flexible scheduling so she could be at his treatments. Total cost to the company, $11,000. He advanced to the next image, Janine's employee file showing her performance reviews. Janine is one of our top performers. Replacing her would cost approximately $60,000 in recruiting, hiring, and training. We saved $49,000 by helping her stay. But more than that, we kept a talented employee, we supported a family through a crisis, and we showed every other employee in this company that we value them as human beings. How do you put a price on that?" The room was silent. Daniel could see several board members looking at Janine's picture, at the numbers, calculating. Holloway recovered quickly. "That's one anecdote. What about the 2 other fund recipients? What's their return on investment?" Daniel was ready for this. He walked through each case methodically. Marcus Thompson, whose father had a stroke, and Lisa Park, whose car accident had left her with medical bills she couldn't pay. In both cases, the assistance provided had cost less than half of what replacing them would have. "The program works," Daniel said, returning to the front of the room. "Not just morally, but financially. We're spending money to make money. We're investing in people who invest in us. And if we expand this carefully and strategically, we can transform Titan Tech into the kind of company that attracts and retains the best talent, because we actually care about their lives. Or we can continue operating the way successful companies have always operated," Holloway said coldly. "Focusing on profit, efficiency, and results. Not coddling employees who can't manage their personal lives." "Marcus," Dr. Wu said, her voice weary, "do you hear yourself? You're advocating for a system that treats people as disposable. That's not just morally bankrupt, it's bad business. It's realistic business. The market doesn't care about feelings. The market cares about sustainability," James Chen spoke up. "And a company that burns through employees isn't sustainable. I've reviewed Daniel's analysis 3 times, and the numbers are solid. This program pays for itself in reduced turnover alone. Everything else is bonus." Another board member, a man who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose we expand the pilot to 3 more departments. Continue tracking metrics for another quarter. If the results hold, we approve company-wide implementation." I second that, Dr. Wu said immediately. This is insane, Holloway said, his voice rising. We're restructuring our entire culture based on 6 weeks of data and a sob story about a janitor who gave blood? This is exactly the kind of emotional decision-making that has no place in corporate leadership. Then maybe corporate leadership needs to change, Alexandra said, standing. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. Marcus, I understand your concerns, I really do. You come from a generation where showing weakness was fatal, where admitting you had a life outside work was seen as lack of commitment, but that world is dying, and companies that don't adapt will die with it. She walked to the window, looking out over the city. We have a choice. We can be the company that treats people as numbers on a spreadsheet, or we can be the company that acknowledges they're human beings with complicated lives. We can optimize for short-term profit, or we can invest in long-term sustainability. We can keep doing things the way we've always done them, or we can have the courage to build something better. She turned back to face the room. I vote to expand the pilot, and if anyone wants to challenge my leadership over this decision, I welcome that challenge, because I'd rather lose my job fighting for something that matters than keep it by staying silent. The vote was called. 8 in favor of expansion, 2 opposed, 2 abstaining. Not unanimous, but enough. After the meeting, as board members filed out, Holloway approached Daniel one last time. You think you've won, he said quietly, but this program will fail, and when it does, I'll make sure everyone knows it was your idea. That a janitor with no business degree tried to tell us how to run a company. Daniel met his eyes without flinching. I'm not a janitor anymore, Mr. Holloway. I'm a consultant, a father, and someone who understands what it's like to be crushed by a system that doesn't care if you live or die. If the program fails, I'll own that. But if it succeeds, and it will, I hope you'll have the grace to admit you were wrong. 3 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Daniel and Mia stood in the parking lot of St. Vincent's Hospital, watching Ellie run toward them with the boundless energy of a healthy child. Daniel! Emaya! She crashed into them with the force of a small hurricane, wrapping her arms around both of them. Guess what? My counts are perfect. The doctor said I might not need a transplant at all. The medicine and the transfusions worked. Alexandra followed more slowly, her face radiant with the kind of joy that came from having stared into the abyss and stepped back. Dr. Chen says it's remarkable. Her bone marrow is starting to produce cells on its own. She's not cured, we still have to monitor her closely, but she's stable. She's going to be okay. That's wonderful, Daniel said, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. I'm so happy for you both. Oh, we're going to celebrate, Ellie announced, with hot chocolate, the really good kind with whipped cream and chocolate chips, and you have to come because Mommy says we're celebrating you too. Me? Why? Because the program got approved for the whole company, Alexandra explained. The board voted yesterday, full implementation starting next month. Everything we built, the flexible scheduling, the emergency fund, the mentorship program, it's all happening. Mia jumped up and down. Daddy, that means you fixed it. You fixed the whole company. We fixed it, Daniel corrected, looking at Alexandra. All of us together. They went to the cafe across the street, the same one where Daniel and Alexandra had first talked about changing things. The girls ordered elaborate hot chocolates and immediately dove into a conversation about whether Elsa could beat Superman in a fight. How does it feel? Daniel asked Alexandra quietly. Knowing it's really happening? Terrifying, exhilarating, like standing on the edge of something huge and not knowing if it's going to work. She stirred her coffee absently. But mostly it feels right. Like for the first time in my career, I'm building something that matters beyond shareholder value. You're going to get pushback, you know that, right? Not everyone's going to embrace this. I know, but we have data now. We have proof it works, and we have something else. We have people like Janine Martinez who are willing to stand up and say this program saved their lives. That's powerful. Alexandra paused. And we have you. You're staying on as Director of Employee Wellness. That was part of the board approval. Daniel felt his breath catch. Director? That's a full-time position with benefits? Salary, benefits, office, everything. You'll oversee implementation across all departments, train managers, handle escalations for the emergency fund. It's a big job. Alexandra smiled. But if anyone can do it, you can. I don't have a business degree. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've lived both sides of this equation. You understand what it's like to need help and what it takes to provide it. That's worth more than any MBA. Daniel looked at Mia, who was demonstrating to Ellie how Elsa's ice powers would work against Kryptonian biology. His daughter, who'd grown up watching him struggle, who'd learned too young what it meant to choose between dignity and survival, deserved to see him succeed, deserved to know that the world could be different. Okay, he said. I'll do it. The transition happened quickly. Daniel gave notice at the janitorial company, who were sorry to lose him but understood. He cleaned out his locker, turned in his uniform, said goodbye to Marcus and the other guards who'd treated him like a human being when he needed it most. His first day as director of employee wellness, he wore a suit that Alexandra had insisted on buying him, stood in an office that had his name on the door and felt like an imposter. But then the first person knocked, a young woman from accounting, tears streaming down her face, explaining that her mother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and she didn't know how to manage work and caregiving. Daniel listened to her story. He walked her through the flexible scheduling options, helped her apply for emergency fund assistance, connected her with resources for caregiver support. And when she left his office, her shoulders were straighter, her face lighter. That's when it hit him. This was real. He was really helping people, really changing things. The weeks turned into months. The program expanded department by department. Daniel hired a team to help manage the growing workload, 2 case managers and an administrative coordinator, all of them people who'd lived through their own crises and understood what it meant to need help. Resistance came, as predicted. Some managers complained about the special treatment. Some employees tried to game the system. Some board members continued to grumble about costs. But the data kept coming in, month after month, showing reduced turnover, improved productivity, higher satisfaction scores. Titan Tech started getting press, good press, about being a leader in employee wellness and work-life balance. Recruitment became easier. The company's reputation shifted. 6 months in, Daniel was sitting in his office reviewing fund applications when Alexandra appeared in his doorway. "Do you have a minute?" "For you, always." She came in and closed the door, her expression serious. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it completely before you respond." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Okay." Marcus Holloway resigned from the board yesterday. He gave some official reason about wanting to spend more time with family, but the reality is he couldn't stomach the direction the company was going. He sent me a letter, his final act of defiance, I guess, saying that we'd turn Titan Tech into a charity organization masquerading as a business and that it would fail within 3 years. Alexandra D. Let me finish. After he resigned, the board met. They reviewed every metric, every expense, every outcome of the program. And then they did something I didn't expect. She paused, and Daniel saw tears in her eyes. They voted unanimously to double the emergency fund budget. They want to expand the program beyond just employees, to include contractors, part-timers, anyone who works for Titan Tech in any capacity. They said, her voice broke. They said this is what Titan Tech should be known for. Not just what we build, but how we treat people while we're building it. Daniel felt something break open in his chest. That's incredible. It's because of you. Because you stood in that boardroom in your janitor's uniform and made them see what they'd been missing, because you turned your pain into purpose. Alexandra wiped her eyes. Thank you for everything, for saving Ellie, for saving me, for showing me what leadership actually looks like. I didn't save you, you saved yourself. I just held up a mirror. Then thank you for the mirror. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. 2 people who'd been brought together by crisis and had chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. How's Ellie doing? Daniel asked. Thriving. She's back in school full-time, her counts are stable, and she's driving me crazy with her endless energy. Alexandra smiled. She wants to have a joint birthday party with Mia next month. They've been planning it in secret, but I've overheard enough to know it involves a lot of frozen decorations and possibly a petting zoo. Mia hasn't mentioned a petting zoo, but that sounds about right. Daniel laughed. She's been happier these past few months than I've seen her since Sarah died. Having a friend like Ellie, having stability, having a father who comes home from work not completely exhausted, it's made a difference. You've made a difference. In my daughter's life. In my life. In hundreds of employees' lives. Alexandra stood. I should let you get back to work, but Daniel, I'm really glad you blocked my elevator that morning, even though I was terrible about it, because it brought us here. After she left, Daniel sat alone in his office, looking out the window at the city below. He thought about that morning 6 months ago, kneeling on the floor with his stuck cleaning cart, being humiliated by a woman who couldn't see past her own crisis. He thought about the choice he'd made in the hospital, to give blood despite the hurt, to help despite having every reason not to. He thought about Sarah's voice, the way she used to say that kindness was never wasted, that every act of grace rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict. And he thought about Mia, and how she'd watched him transform from broken to something new. Not because circumstances changed, but because he'd had the courage to insist on being more than what the world told him he could be. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia, sent from Mrs. Chen's apartment. Daddy, can Ellie sleep over next Friday? We want to build a blanket fort and watch movies and talk about important things like whether Anna should have married Christoph so fast or if they should have dated longer first. Mrs. Chen says it's okay with her if it's okay with you and Ellie's mom. Daniel smiled and typed back, I'll check with Ellie's mom, but I think we can make that happen. Love you, sweetheart. Love you more, Daddy. You're the best. Another text came in, this one from Alexandra. Ellie just asked if Mia can sleep over Friday. I assume our daughters have coordinated this. Should we just accept that we've been outmaneuvered by 9- and 7-year-olds? Daniel laughed and responded, I think that's the wisest course of action. These two are a force of nature. They really are. I'll bring Ellie by Friday after school, and Daniel, thank you for everything, but especially for letting Mia and Ellie be friends, for not holding my mistakes against my daughter. Ellie's not responsible for your mistakes, and honestly, they're not mistakes anymore. They're just the path that brought us all here. He set down his phone and returned to the fund applications on his desk. There was Marcus Thompson requesting assistance for his father's ongoing stroke rehabilitation. There was a new request from someone in sales whose husband had lost his job and they were facing eviction. There was another from a programmer whose child needed surgery. Each application represented a crisis, a moment when someone's life was falling apart and they needed help. And Daniel got to be the person who helped them, who said, yes, we see you, we value you, you matter. It wasn't the career he'd planned, wasn't the life he'd imagined when he'd been a young engineer with a wife and dreams and the arrogant certainty that tragedy happened to other people. But it was meaningful, it was right, it was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the afternoon sun slanted through his office window, Daniel approved the applications, sent the emails, made the calls that would change lives. And he thought about how sometimes the worst moments of your life, the humiliations, the losses, the moments when you were broken open, were just doorways to becoming who you were always meant to be. Not despite the pain, because of it. And that made all the difference. Outside, the city breathed and moved and lived. Somewhere, a CEO was learning to lead with humanity instead of just efficiency. Somewhere, a little girl who'd almost died was planning a sleepover and arguing about Disney characters with her best friend. Somewhere, employees were getting help when they needed it most. Their crises transformed from catastrophes into manageable challenges. And in an office with his name on the door, a former janitor who'd given blood to save a stranger's child smiled and got back to work, knowing that the world was just a little bit better than it had been yesterday. That was enough. That was everything. That was grace.